Preparing for takeoff here. All right, we are live. Call the committee back to order. And I want to thank our witnesses for being willing to delay for 15 minutes. As usual, we didn't schedule enough time for the last witness, and he was very helpful. Okay, we're going to switch gears, kind of. We're going back to H413. This is an act relating to miscellaneous energy subjects. And Jim Porter asked to talk to us today, so we're going to put Jim on first from the department, and then we'll work through the rest of our witness list. So, Mr. Porter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Jim Porter. I am the Director for Public Advocacy at the Department of Public Service. And the piece of the bill I was going to briefly talk about was a couple of changes that have been proposed to the Nuclear Decommissioning Citizens Advisory Panel. Okay. And is everybody generally familiar with what that group does? As you know, the Vermont Yankee plant is currently being decommissioned. It was sold by Entergy to a company named North Star, and decommissioning is underway and on track at the moment. There are a couple of changes that are proposed, and this bill was proposed by the INDCAP panel. One change is that when you look at the statutory makeup of who's on the INDCAP, there was a member of the IBEW who was there since Entergy left and the decommissioning began. The IBEW is no longer on site. And so this bill would propose to add one additional member from the town of Vernon, which of course is where the plant is located. There is also a member from the state of New Hampshire and from the state of Massachusetts. Since we really have no ability to direct that they submit someone to be on the panel, there's a small change that would make those two optional members. And then I think the primary change came about where the commissioner of the Department of Public Service had the authority to, the department provides various support for the INDCAP. And funds for that, years ago, it was written that they came from our gross receipts. Back at the time when the plant was operating and was paying gross receipts. So the one change proposed here is that, and North Star, the new owner, they're supportive of this, but they would appropriate up to $35,000 a year that the commissioner would then have the ability to let the panel hire various resources that they may need. As I say, the tenor has changed a little bit because now it's the decommissioning is underway. There's maybe some other issues that have arisen. And that is basically the substance of the changes in here. Any questions?
Any questions at this point, Senator McDonald?
So that means you dropped the notion of changing the name of the place?
That's in there too. I'm sorry. I got to get my reading glasses. It's now just called Vermont Yankee in the statute as opposed to VYNPS.
It's called, or it's proposed to call it?
Proposed to be called Vermont Yankee as opposed to the old name.
It's called the old thing?
The old name.
In current statute, it's the VYNPS. And then that has been struck in this proposed bill, and it would just be Vermont Yankee.
Is that because Entergy no longer owns the plant?
That's correct, and it no longer operates.
It no longer operates it, so it's North Star.
So the old name of the facility was, when spell it, not the initials, but the name was?
Well, in statute, it was called the Vermont Yankee Nuclear Power Station. And so what it does now is it just calls it Vermont Yankee.
So it's currently a nuclear waste site? Or it's not?
I think they're trying to clean it up and decommission it. It's not a power station at the moment.
What is it if it's not a power station?
Well, I have always believed that the power station in statute was someone who was producing power.
I understand that, Mr. Porter. What is it now? In your
Okay,
opinion,
Senator McDonald,
Yeah.
I believe that is beyond the scope of this bill. This bill is talking about changing some membership on the board and changing a name. I don't think anything is changing the status or whatever you want to call it is now. And I'm watching the time and
So-
I'm trying to keep us on track.
Madam Chair, if they want to name the place Mickey Mouse in statute, they're welcome to put forward a proposal to do that. I believe they put forward a proposal to call the thing Vermont Yankee. And I would, instead of the letters that used to suggest it was a nuclear power facility. So, and I oppose that. I may be the only person on the committee that opposing, calling it something that misrepresents what it is.
Okay,
So-
Senator, I would suggest when the committee discusses this section of the bill, that you bring us an amendment and then you can explain to the committee why you would prefer another name. You've been
So
on
would,
this,
once again, I'll ask Mr. Porter, as someone who understands this business, what is the thing there? If he were to describe it in English, what would he call it?
I will try to describe it in English. Frankly, it is the site of a former operating nuclear plant, and monthly pieces of that plant are coming down and being decommissioned.
Thank you.
it is a decommissioning site, is it not?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Senator. Yes.
The plant is being decommissioned and demolished and cleaned up supposedly. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Porter? Senator Hardy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mr. Porter, for your testimony. I think you said this, but I'm sleepy, so I want to make sure I heard it. All the members, the changes in the membership and the changes in the funding are everybody's on board who is involved, like the current members and the potential future members?
Yes, Senator. This was something that the INDICAP, the full committee, came up with last year. I think it actually was introduced, and I can't remember if it passed the House last year, but this bill represents the committee's efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to move on to Bill Jordan, who is Director of Engineering at DPS. Bill, there you are. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, my name for the record is Bill Jordan. I am the Director of Engineering at the Department of Public Service, and I'm here to provide testimony on two pieces of the bill. The first one is the proposed amendments to 30 VSA Section 207, which is the accident investigation piece of it. And then there's a second piece of it, which is a public records, which is a separate piece, not related, is a public records amendment to exclude cybersecurity information from public records. And so I'm here to testify on both of those pieces, and I could start by walking through them, or I can, each one of them, or I can answer questions however you'd like to handle it.
Why don't you walk through your testimony?
Sure.
And then we'll do questions.
All right. So I'll start with 30 VSA section 207. The original statute required the Department of Public Service to investigate, and I'll summarize, any accident on infrastructure by a regulated utility. And then if the department determined that a public investigation was required, it directed the department to use a process by what is now called the Railroad Board. And so there are really two changes here to this section. One would be to for workplace accidents on utility plant, for VOSHA to take the lead on those investigations, because VOSHA is doing that anyway by their statutory charge. And so in the past, when there have been accidents which were considered workplace accidents on utility infrastructure, the Department of Public Service and VOSHA were both performing separate independent investigations, interviewing all the same witnesses separately and producing separate reports. And we tried to coordinate schedules, but that's not always easy to do. And so a lot of times, I mean, these don't happen too often, but enough times in the past it had happened, we were doing entirely separate investigations. And VOSHA really is the expert here on workplace accidents. And since they're doing it anyway per their charge, the intent of this change is to make it clear that for workplace accidents under VOSHA jurisdiction, that VOSHA takes the lead. The department can provide utility expertise as needed, and we have done that in the past when VOSHA has requested it. And also there's an information sharing piece, so the department can receive information from VOSHA in order to perform our duties when regulating utilities. For accidents that do not involve workplace, that are not workplace accidents, the Department of Public Service would continue to investigate those as we have in the past. And then the other change is to, instead of invoking the Railroad Board process, we would report to the Public Utility Commission, which we believe is more appropriate currently. And I'll stop there for the accident investigation piece of this, and I can take any questions, or if you'd like me to move on to cybersecurity, I can do that either way.
Now let's do a couple here. What is a non-workplace accident?
For example, it would be if a car hit a pole and something happened, or if a homeowner was doing something on their property and came in contact with a utility facility and was hurt, as opposed
Live
to,
wire on the ground kind of thing?
yes,
Okay.
as opposed to a utility employee working on the lines and being hurt.
All right. I have one other one, but it slipped my mind. It'll come to me. Committee, any questions? All right, and the Railroad Board. Haven't heard of that one. What?
Well, historically, way back when I think in a lot of states, the Utility Commission might have started out as a railroad commission that then started incorporating regulating utilities as well. And I think that was just a holdover from those times that never got updated.
Do we actually have a Railroad Board?
Yes, if you look at the original statute and you go back to the reference in the original 207, that brings you to the railroad. I believe it's called the Railroad Board.
All right. Okay, and this would put it with the PUC. Okay. Committee, other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any. Let's go to the next part.
Okay, I'll just switch screens and get to that part of the bill. So what we've proposed here is adding to the public records exemptions, and I'll read the language: records relating to a regulated utilities cybersecurity program, assessments, and plans, including all reports, summaries, compilations, analyses, notes, and other cybersecurity information. And this has arisen because the department is working with the electric utilities and also Efficiency Vermont by direction from the Public Utility Commission to meet with them and discuss cybersecurity issues. And our practice is not to have any written materials in our possession that describe the utility's cybersecurity programs or infrastructure, because obviously that's sensitive information and we wouldn't want that to get out to the public. And so this was put in as a safeguard in case the department inadvertently obtains any of that information. We wouldn't want it to be released.
Okay, committee, any questions on that? No? Okay. So, thank you. We have any questions for Mr. Jordan? Attorney McDonald?
I can't hear you, Madam Chair.
Oh, do you have a question? I'm looking
No,
for
I
questions.
just couldn't hear you.
Oh, okay. I'll get closer to my mic. All right. Then if there are no questions for Mr. Jordan, I'm going to move on to Ann Margolis, who is Deputy Planning Director at the department. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thanks very much for having me, Madam Chair.
Now, Ann,
Chair Margolis.
if that's you that's talking, you sound like you're,
Let me try this again.
there you
better?
go. Okay,
Yeah,
sounded like you were 75 record on a 33 speed there.
I think my earpiece might be dying here. Thank you very much for having me, Madam Chair, and to the committee. I appreciate your time. I'll try to be quick. I have thrown together a few slides here. If it would be okay for me to share my
Yes.
screen. It may not be. able-
Fine. I think, yep.
All right.
Are you
may-
co-host? Can we?
Yes, she's co-host, Madam Chair.
Yes, co-host. Okay, so you can share those.
Let me give this a try. Can folks see?
Yep.
Great. Maybe you've lost it now. I may be looking away from you, so just don't mind that. Let me know if you have any questions as we go along. Just holler at me. So I wanted to just orient folks to why we proposed this piece of legislation. We are seeing, you've probably heard about it, quite a bit of development of energy storage, particularly battery storage systems in Vermont, both residential scale, commercial and industrial scale, and then utility scale. We're really seeing a lot of development over the past 5 years, and we wanted to normalize the regulatory structure around energy storage where it made sense in a similar way to how we treat electric generation. As you know, energy storage can act both as a load and as a supply of electrons to the grid. And where it's acting as a supply in particular, we wanted to make sure that the Public Utility Commission had jurisdiction and had the ability to look at issues of system stability and reliability. So these are the grid impacts in particular, as well as safety issues. And also where these projects are proposed, they may have, in Vermont, they may have an impact on Vermont ratepayers, and we want to make sure that those are being evaluated. So I just wanted to, I know there were some questions during the bill walkthrough about different sizes of storage systems. Here's a few representative systems in Vermont. They range from, your residential Powerwall 5.5 kilowatt system on the upper left. Below, we have the King Street Youth Center, that's in Burlington Electric Department territory. That's a 30 kilowatt system. Up, you guys know about, obviously, the State House system that was installed. That's in the bottom middle. That's a 50 kilowatt
That's the
system.
first I think any of us have seen that.
It's in the basement, I understand, and I don't know if they do tours or anything down there, but on the upper right, this is a solar plus storage facility in Panton. This is a 1 megawatt 4-hour system. You'll hear about storage in terms of capacity, which is the megawatts or kilowatts, and then the energy. So that's where you get the kilowatt hours or the megawatt hours, and that's really the duration that the storage can put out its full rated capacity. Many battery storage systems are in 4-hour durations. And then in the bottom right, this is the Milton system in GMP territory. It's another solar plus storage system. That's 2 megawatts, 8 megawatt hours. That was before the fencing went up around it. I'll move on to the next slide. The legislature has asked us to do a couple looks at storage over the past 3 to 4 years. So back in 2017, pursuant to Act 53, we did a report that really looked at a broad suite of issues around energy storage. I think that was sent to your committee, and it's also available on the department's website. I won't be talking about that one here today. That report did end up in a small modification to Section 248, where the regulatory threshold for receiving or for having to pursue a 248 certificate of public good was set at 500 kilowatts. And along with that, there was statute directing the department to look at really what are the whole kit and caboodle of changes that need to be made in Title 30 to properly accommodate energy storage, and is the 500 kilowatts the right threshold for a 248 certificate of public good to be required. So that's really the focus of the bill that you see before you today. Just to give you a sense of the storage that's been deployed in Vermont to date, these systems are all online as of right now. The first row really encompasses all of those small Powerwall type systems that are in residences primarily. And those are, there's actually tariffs, at least in Green Mountain Power territory right now, that govern what those systems are paid for their services. And those continue on. There's, kind of rapid deployment of those smaller systems because there's a tariff model now. We've moved beyond the pilot stage. The other systems are larger utility scale storage systems that were installed, many of them by Green Mountain Power, but we're increasingly seeing non-utility entities, so third parties, installing larger battery storage systems and offering the services provided by those systems to Vermont utilities, something like a power purchase agreement, but it's really called something like an energy storage agreement or an energy storage services agreement. So you'll see there's a 5 megawatt, 20 megawatt hour system in East Barry, or it's in Barry at the old Northern Power Systems site. That one's just recently gone online, and it's one of the largest battery storage systems we have in Vermont right now. And I did a quick survey in EPUC. That's the commission's case management system just before this. And I noticed that there are an additional 13.5 megawatts worth of storage projects proposed right now. So we really are thinking about battery storage and energy storage writ large in a whole bunch of different ways. We think about it from a planning perspective. So you hear a lot of discussion about resilience, battery storage for resilience. What does it contribute? How should we compensate it? Who should pay for that value? Green Mountain Power did a climate plan where they look at battery storage. Velco is looking at storage and flexible loads in terms of mitigating some of the impacts of high levels of generation in some areas of Vermont on the transmission system. The state climate action plan and the comprehensive energy plan will both be talking about storage as one part of a larger discussion of grid modernization or grid optimization, whichever term you want. The utility integrated resource plans that Vermont utilities have to have to file every 3 years. Nearly all of them talk about storage to a great degree. And then the Act 174 regional and municipal enhanced energy plans are all, all of those entities are very curious about energy storage and how their plans should accommodate it. So that's on the planning side. And then on the deployment side, we're seeing an increasing proliferation of areas where we need to spend more time and get it right. So those include the 248 criteria. I just listed a few of them here, and our proposed language in this bill really tries to put a fine point on what are the criteria we're going to use to evaluate storage projects. How do you evaluate the costs and benefits of storage? How do you consider storage and also flexible loads in terms of addressing generation constraints? How should storage be reviewed from an interconnection perspective, especially when it's paired with another resource like a solar facility? What are the safety issues? You may have heard in some other places besides Vermont, other jurisdictions, there's been some larger scale battery storage fires. And so we want to make sure we don't have those incidents materializing in Vermont. How do we look at storage when it's deployed with, say, a net metered resource? And do we give it the same level of compensation, especially if it's storing some of that production for export later in the evening? Does that get the same net metered compensation? How do we deal with storage resources that are participating behind the meter in retail markets as well as in aggregated up into wholesale markets? We'll talk about aggregations in a minute. How do we look at storage and all of the resources on our grid in terms of being able to see them, know what they're doing, how they're operating, and some level of control over them if there's a threat to system stability and reliability? And then again, aggregations pursuant to recent FERC Order 2222, which you'll probably hear us talking about quite a bit in the coming years. There's an opportunity for storage as part of an aggregation with demand response, solar, all kinds of distributed energy resources to be bundled up into something like a virtual power plant and to participate in regional wholesale markets for providing capacity, for providing energy, for providing ancillary services. Any market that these resources can participate in, the market operators are required to enable that participation. So aggregation, I think this came up last time you guys were looking at this bill language. I put in the FERC Order 2222 definition of aggregation. Really, we're just talking about storage in this bill. We may be coming back to in subsequent years to look at broader types of aggregations. But really an aggregation is just an assembly of a whole bunch of distributed energy resources, in this case, storage facilities that are bundled up to act in this virtual manner. They may be distributed all over the grid, but they're bundled up and they're offering a service as a cohesive resource. So that's really what an aggregation is. And just a visual of what an aggregation could look like. This comes from a National Renewable Energy Laboratory paper, but you're looking at not just your storage system, but your solar PV, your smart thermostat, your controllable water heater, your electric vehicle charger, all of that receiving signals to dispatch to either sort of charge or discharge if it's a battery, or to reduce, say, charging if it's an EV charger, and all of that controlled through information technology and operational technology. So really software. We're not really at this point yet, but everybody thinks that we need to get cracking on it, and because we're going to be here pretty soon, at least in New England. So Act 31 asked us to look at all of these issues and to figure out some statutory language to make sure we're looking at them properly. To perform that work, we had a bunch of meetings with utilities and developers during the fall of 2019. We issued draft recommendations for comment again in November of 2019. We received written comments from the entities you see listed here. We issued our final recommendations in early 2020. I believe we testified in the House on our language, and then the pandemic happened, so things got put on pause for a while. And then we revisited the issue this year, hoping to move the language along. And now we're here. So hopefully we can walk through any questions that you have. Essentially, the sections of the bill do the following. Sections 3, 4, 5, 6, and 10 clarify the commission's general jurisdiction over energy storage. Sections 7 and 8 offer some very specific modifications in Title 30 to waive certain requirements that would normally be waived for sort of a similar size renewable resource. And then to make sure that aggregators, I talked about aggregations. Aggregators are the folks operating an aggregation. We want to make sure there's some light regulatory touch on those entities and the proper requirements and bounds on them. Section 9 requires, again, that threshold for a 248 certificate of public good be lowered from 500 kilowatts to 100 kilowatts. That is because 100 kilowatts is the threshold for one of these aggregations or a storage resource to participate in the regional wholesale markets, where you may have these issues of ratepayer impacts coming up. And then Section 11 recommends essentially the rulemaking, where the commission will hold workshops and find out, ways in which they need to either create a rule specific to storage or modify existing rules to accommodate storage. We did have two, of course, we can continually want to improve the work product we put out there. We did have two minor proposed changes to bring to your attention. Everyone gets a second look at the bill. Back in the House, we had proposed our original language. We then received some request from Renewable Energy Vermont, so from the development community, to make some changes. We put forward a new version of the bill that incorporated as many of those changes as we felt didn't throw off the balance we'd already struck from working with stakeholders in the prior year. And so one of those changes became untenable for the other stakeholders. That is the next one I will discuss. This particular one on Section 6, it just has to do with clarifying what we mean by storage in this part of statute. There was a concern that was offered just recently by the Public Utility Commission in taking another look at this language, that it could be read to say that the commission has jurisdiction over gas storage. And that is not what we are intending with this language. And Mr. Faber may wish to speak to this as well. So what we wanted to the clarifying language we offer here is to add Section 8 or a subsection 8 in Section 203 that says, for the purposes of this section, storage shall mean an energy storage facility as defined in Section 201. So that definition is already offered in the bill, that Section 201 definition. And then the one change that we're thinking we may need to walk back from where things arrived in the House is this ability for the requirement, I guess, for the commission to issue a basically deem a certificate issued for a proposed 100 kilowatt to 1 megawatt energy storage facility within 31 days. I think, and Mr. Faber will speak to this as well, I think the concern there is that there's nowhere else in statute where it requires the commission to issue a registration or certificate of public good within a certain date or time frame. And so there's concerns that nobody knows yet whether 31 days is adequate for a review of a 100 kW up to a 1 megawatt system. I think the thinking is we need to have this workshop, this series of workshops in this rulemaking to figure out what are the issues for a 100 kilowatt system, a 500 kilowatt system, a 1 megawatt system. Is 31 days enough? And if 31 days is the time in which a CPG needs to be issued, you walk back from that, the time in which utilities, the Agency of Natural Resources, and the department need to file their comments. And that could be, a 2-week time frame, and that may be also unworkable from the agency perspective. And Mr. Koster may also speak to that. So those were just the two minor changes we wanted to request today, and hopefully we can not tweak this any further. I know that would drive everyone nuts, but I'm happy to answer questions. I can stop sharing now unless anyone wants to see any of the slides anymore.
Okay, I think that's fine. Then we can get back to seeing each other.
All right,
Any
try to
questions, committee?
Get rid of that.
I am not hearing any as we're getting this down. Okay, Senator Bray, you're muted, Senator.
That there would,
Yep, you're good.
thank you. I have just a quick question on the sort of in reverse order. So on the timing issue, do we have some automatic timelines on net metering for the smallest systems? Like 15-day approval unless the PUC says something otherwise, or I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, it's in the rule. So it's not in the statute. I think that's the rub here. The statute requires it enables the commission to set up different timelines and process waivers for different sizes and types of systems. So the way the commission implemented that was for these small, for under 15 kW and smaller, there's a 10-day registration process that's set up in the net metering rule. And then for a rooftop solar system of any size, so up to the net metering limit of 500 kilowatts, that's a 30-day review period. So that I think the issue is that the hope is that that could go into rule as opposed to statute.
I get it. Okay, thanks. Those are the only other two timing ones I knew of, and just trying to get my facts straight. They'd faded. I'm not keeping all the net metering rules front and center. The other quick thing on the FERC 2222. So is this something like PURPA? It basically is opening the marketplace to letting other non-utility folks participate in providing energy into the grid. Yeah, and that's how I think of PURPA, like sort of opening the door to other generators to participate.
It's in the same spirit, absolutely. There's sort of been a series of FERC orders in the last, say, 5 to 8 years. There was FERC order 841 was, I think, one specific to storage, and then I want to say 741, but I might be getting that wrong, was about demand response. So it was direction to the ISO New England, so the regional transmission organizations, which in New England's case is ISO New England, to remove all barriers to participation if a resource is physically able to offer a service, so into a market. So there are potential barriers right now that stakeholders have argued to FERC successfully are in place right now to aggregations, in particular participating in capacity, energy, and ancillary services markets. And so this is the first time I think we're going to see these heterogeneous aggregations. So demand response has been aggregated up into the capacity market for a while now, but you're going to see your demand response with your storage, with your solar, and one point of contact for ISO New England to be sort of issuing commands for that aggregation. And so the distribution utility is somewhere in there. Everyone's figuring that out right now.
Okay. So the aggregators are like ESCOs, energy service companies?
That would be one type. It could be an entity like Efficiency Vermont might be aggregating up resources. I can see potential solar development organizations aggregating up, some of their customer resources, with storage potentially. So it may be broadening that definition of ESCOs, but the same type of entity, yes.
And one last quick question, just so I'm imagining how they might work better. So there's a lot of coordination and control that would be involved. And is the utility still going to handle it? Will this be utility IT that handles it, or do they have to build their own communication system in parallel?
That's a very good question, Senator Bray. Everyone is trying to figure out implementation right now. The RTOs were required to issue compliance tariffs to spell all of this out by this summer. I think it was July. My understanding is there's going to be a request, at least from ISO New England, to delay that to February. And there's a lot of working groups furiously trying to figure out where does the utility, the distribution utility get involved? Right now, the obligation, an aggregation is only sort of entitled to participate if it's in the service territory of a utility with 4 million megawatt hours of sales in the previous fiscal year. So right now that really only implicates Green Mountain Power. So if you think about Green Mountain Power and you think about ISO New England and an aggregator, I think the thinking is there's going to be some stay ahead scheduling where the utility may get sort of an override. So they get some say, but it's not the utility that's actually kind of pushing the buttons on it. So that telemetry, interoperability, communications piece is a big missing technological element right now. And it will behoove Vermont to be working toward those kinds of tools in the state to, in some ways, it may make sense to think about, are our retail programs compelling enough so that resources aren't bypassing the Vermont distribution utilities and going right to ISO New England?
Right. Okay. Well, great. Well, yeah, I would think the security piece of that would get to be a very intense concern for you DUs that manage a very tightly closed network. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Senator McDonald.
So on the aggregators, are we looking at a new type of technology that has yet to be developed that blends a variety of the many different numbers and calculations and excesses or surpluses or changing switches going on and off? It's not a push button operation. It's something that thinks it through and then orders, like a non-human ordering of activities.
Yeah, my sense is that this will be computerized through, there will be, I think there's probably a lot of software development right now going on to figure out how to optimize. So right now, if you think about the things that are aggregated, Green Mountain Power, for instance, their Powerwall program, that is an aggregation, but the utility is operating it. And they have the proprietary software called Grid Logic that it really does all of the thinking. There's a human intervention at some point to say yes or no, but that software, that Grid Logic, is looking at market signals. It's looking at state of charge of all of the batteries of the customers. It's looking even potentially at incoming weather to say, do we need to hold off on dispatching these because there's going to be a ice storm or something, and making a bunch of decisions. And then I think it comes down to, kind of a yes or no for the operator sitting in the control room. You get a better sense of the details from Green Mountain Power directly. So but the same concept, this is sort of third parties being able to use software that's communicating with these devices, assuming that they have the right communications protocols, and being able to figure out, does it make sense? Are we checking all the boxes from ISO's perspective? Is ISO making us do any boxes to check with GMP? And if everything's clear, then we can go ahead and dispatch tomorrow, when prices reach X, for instance.
We're talking about permitting or declaring these things to be functional and usable and giving them names.
It's taking advantage of all this emerging technology to its full extent.
Sounds like Hal, Madam Chair.
I think Hal has been with us for a while.
68.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get a little nervous about some box outside my house telling me when I can dry my clothes or wash my dishes. I'm not sure I'm ready to go there yet, but I may not have a choice.
You're not alone.
Okay, I think we'll have GMP in to talk with us about this. Any questions for Ms. Margolis? None. Okay. There are
Pretty interesting,
advantages to
Madam
being
Chair.
here at the end of a long day.
Very,
Thank you.
very interesting to try to picture in your own mind, which others are still trying to imagine. Yeah.
Okay, we're on to Billy Coster. Mr. Coster, I don't think I've ever seen you in this committee, and it's been twice in 3 days now.
No, yes and no. Thank you, Sarah Cummings. I have been in this committee before and not at all this year. So you must think I'm somebody else right now.
No, I remember, you were not here talking about right-of-ways last week or the week before?
Nope.
It was another Billy? Okay.
Possible. Let me take my glasses off for you. But
I thought you were here last week. I
All right.
must be hallucinating. Okay, we'll get on with it.
Thank you, everyone. I'll try to be brief. For the record, I'm Billy Coster, the Director of Planning for the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. As many of you know, ANR is a statutory party for Section 248 proceedings, and we review all applications for transmission and generation projects that go before the PUC for a certificate of public good, with the exception of small net metered registrations and rooftop projects. We have been reviewing larger battery storage projects for a number of years now. All of the larger ones on Ms. Margolis' lists are ones that we've reviewed as an agency. And under this bill, we would review a larger number of projects as they come forward to the PUC. And the only comment and request I would make of you today is one that Ann shared, and it deals with the 30-day deadline for the issuance of a decision. That raises some concerns for us for a number of reasons. As Ann articulated, we don't really know how long this is going to take, and the workshop process with all parties to kind of work through scenarios is likely the best way to get to the bottom of that. Another question we have or concern is that the conversation right now is focused on battery storage, but as the bill is drafted and energy storage is defined, there are other technologies that could come to bear in this space that we have less familiarity with, and we just don't know what it would look like to regulate and review those sorts of projects. Storage projects themselves, getting up, especially those getting closer to a megawatt in capacity, may have necessary distribution or sub-transmission upgrades associated with those projects that we would need to review, and that might take time depending on the complexity of the project. And then finally, we have a 30-day comment period for net metered projects currently. That's just the amount of time we have from when we receive the application to file our substantive comments with the commission. That time period is manageable, but it can be challenging during periods of high volume, and having a 30-day period to complete the whole process would likely truncate our time to participate. And I think that really this is a great opportunity for the rulemaking process and the fine workshops that the commission run to take the legislative intent to come up with an efficient and expedited process, but pick the actual hard dates through rulemaking instead of statute. So that's my request to you all.
Okay, so basically, nobody likes the 30 days or 31 days. All right. Any questions for Mr. Coster? Not seeing any. Okay, so we'll move on to Greg
Thank you.
Faber.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Afternoon.
I am Greg Faber with the PUC, and I just have a couple of quick comments. Basically on Section 6, which Ms. Margolis highlighted in her presentation. We support the department's recommended changes to that section because the way it's worded now could lead to someone interpreting this as us, the PUC, having jurisdiction over gas storage. And that's not what this is about. This is really just to add energy storage to Section 203, which establishes our jurisdiction over certain utilities. So once you add that definition that the department has proposed, that would definitely fix this section for us. So we support that. We also support the changes to Section 9, which Mr. Coster was just speaking about. And Mr. Coster is definitely correct. It would be very difficult for us to have get meaningful comments and issue a CPG within 30 days, even for the smallest, net metering projects. We have 30-day comment period, and that's sometimes hard for agencies to meet, let alone joiners, towns, things like that. They operate on different schedules. Towns don't meet every week. They sometimes meet once a month or maybe twice a month. So it would really squeeze everyone who wants to comment on a project like this. And you know, CPGs, they usually they contain site-specific conditions. So if a CPG goes out that's sort of deemed issued, it's not going to have any conditions on it. And we won't be able to put any conditions on it because there's a statutory provision in there. So what we would like to see, rather than having this statutory provision, is allowing us, you know, we support the idea of having a simplified process for these, especially these very small storage facilities, but we'd like to develop that in the rulemaking that's contemplated in section 12 of the bill. And that's really what we would like here, rather than seeing something like this in statute, which could cause a lot of problems for us and all the other agencies and joiners in towns like I just described. So that's pretty much it. We just, yeah, as you said, we don't like the 30 days. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay. So who likes the 30 days
Who
other
likes
than
it?
the House committee?
I'm not, you know, the committee really didn't have a lot of discussion on this. It was put in by Renewable Energy Vermont, sort of a last minute provision. As I said, not a lot of discussion. We didn't really get a chance to talk about this much in the House. So, so here we are, we're talking to you folks.
All right, well, I do have renewable energy on my list of people to have in, along with GMP. Committee, if you have anybody else you think we should hear from, let me know. Any questions for Mr. Faber? I am not seeing any. And so thank you. I think this has been helpful. I think this is probably one of the least controversial energy bills we're going to have so far. At some point, we do have a proposal for taxing these bills that it's our intent to put on them on this bill. So you might want to take a look. Senator Pearson, do you have there's a number on that bill?
There is a number.
And none of us remember. Ellen, can you help us?
Yes, I believe it is S-128.
Okay, S-128. If anybody wants to take a look at that and give us some feedback.
And the concept is to just treat storage the way we do solar, in terms of it's in lieu of property tax kind of treatment.
Okay. Seeing no questions, and say thank you to everyone. Committee, since we don't have a chairs meeting, and we have 5 whole minutes, and I am starting to feel very pressured by trying to get all the bills we're going to need to get out of here. There is a end of session planning tomorrow. I'm having trouble organizing this week. Joint fiscal starts at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So thought we had some discussion. I sent you home with homework. Senator Bray did his homework.
Well, and I'm wondering if one way to deal with it is to screen share it. I know that Faith emailed it out, but
I think
pretty
Senator Pearson, you are now host. So if you make Senator Bray co-host.
What's this message? It says installing virus on your computer now.
I have no idea. Senator Pearson is in charge. He is now Hal.
You should be very serious. All right, Senator Bray, I think you can now post your whatever share. Do you know how to do that?
Yeah, I think this is going to work. The weird thing is
Something is coming up. Okay, looks good.
I can't see precisely what you see. So
I see some principles for 2021 broadband program.
is it big enough, bigger, smaller? That
I can read it. It's got some stuff around the edges, but if I can read it, I think most people can.
So you were thinking about, I mean, there's so much stuff going on. For me, I was just trying to boil it down to have some principles to make decisions by. And I think we actually turns out a lot of them came up today in the conversation already, but, utilities have a very conservative approach because reliability is one of the most important things they ever that they're responsible for, and they get rated on reliability. Safety and reliability are first and foremost. And so it made me think about, well, how, although we've talked about CUDs as sort of this more homegrown grassroots thing, I was really trying to put a engineering utility mindset to the whole thing. So building for durability, like that 30 to 40-year investment. And I don't know if that only means fiber, or there's, someone might say, oh, well, don't just think fiber, you should think of cable as well. I don't know the answer to that one, but whatever it is, something that is long-lived. And then the B, adopt an appropriate industry standard and require its use by any entity funded by the program, so that we end up with, Christine Halquist said it a couple months ago, there was when the Rural Electrification Act came through, they published a standard, and she said that there is, even today, sort of a handbook that spells out all the standards. And if you're building stuff, you build exactly to that standard, from the wires to your house to the substation. And so it provides for stability across the system, as opposed to getting islands of different solutions delivered, which I don't think. Yeah.
Can I interrupt here? I was thinking today, as Irv was talking, and we were talking about overbuilding, and then the discussion we had with Consolidated, that you can't just hook fiber up to cable. So if there's cable downtown and somebody wants to go from this isolated road to that isolated road, in the fastest way is through downtown, they have to double string. Unless there's also a whole set of backup.
Right.
So that you want it so that no matter who owns it, at some point you just splice or plug it together, and you can have a united system, which is this engineering standards.
Right.
And
I don't know if, so Irv didn't know if we have such a thing that's guiding the development of all the CUDs now, but it'd be interesting to know. And I'm just borrowing that from Christine's visit 2 months ago. D is really, I think, in part what you're talking about, requiring interoperability so that no funded entity becomes an island, so that because these things, who knows what will happen to them over time. We wouldn't want things that didn't work well with each other, and part of the way to make them work well with each other is have a common standard. C is require the ability to evolve and upgrade the design at the design and engineering level, so that our investment lasts and keeps on evolving with our own needs. Then second is the other thing we've talked about more and more lately, which seems like a good role. So the state becomes a technical assistance center for design engineering, permitting, legal, marketing got thrown in today. I was thinking about it as a turnkey solution. So we, by standardizing, we can lower the costs for everyone by basically creating a little bit of, I don't want to imply something too simple when I say cookie cutter, but something where we get to use this same expertise and information over and over again with as little customizing as possible. Then the state becomes, maybe it's handling federal money as well. I don't know. Our other role becomes funding. A fourth thing here, state provides a mechanism for managing the entities and the questions relating to rights and responsibilities that they have, as well as the relationships between them. Because there could be quote unquote border conflicts, things like that. And then fifth, thinking really longer term, like 5 and 10 and 20 years out, state ensures that entities have provisions for mergers, acquisitions, and closures, including to the degree possible recoverability on the part of the state of Vermont of its investment if it's not already fully depreciated. So could be 2 CUDs say, this is great, but we could save a lot of back office expense by just becoming one bigger CUD, and we'll do all the billing. So then maybe they merge. And I don't know how you structure them from the get-go to make that easier, but I don't know that in 20 years from now, we want to have 14 CUDs. Maybe by then it's 2 or 3, who knows? But it might save us money and help save cost over the long haul if they were designed with that thought in mind from the beginning. That's all. So that's what I just wanted to chip into the conversation.
Okay. That's a lot of thought. I told you the adrenaline would drop, Senator.
Yeah, I'm super tired. I'm sorry.
Senator Hardy, I think, outlined the entire budget for health and welfare this morning. She has done a tremendous, and all the bills and all the asks that have come to the committee. It was a tremendous job of work, which she did on her own. And yeah, my eyes started to cross by the end. So it was a lot of work. So, and I have a feeling most of us have kind of hit that tilt point. Has anybody else got anything you want to kind of throw out on the table at this point?
Not on the table, but a question. Maria, forgive me if you've already given us this. Do we have a section by section for this guy? For the bill? Is it on our website? Do we know?
You do for H360, you do. And you also have, and it is on your website, and you also have a comparison summary of H360 and Senator Brock's bill S118.
I appreciate that. The reason I ask is a lot of what we've been talking about is actually in the bill. And I think now that the concepts are gelling a little bit in my mind, I'll just say for myself that I'm going to look at that and see what I think might be missing.
Okay. And it might, Maria, be helpful if we did something we do it with miscellaneous tax as proposed House, Senate. We might do that third block, and then we can go through and we can say, okay, section 1 or issue 1, this is the version we're going to choose, or we're going to choose to do something else. This one, we're not there yet, but go through and decide what we've decided, and then just keep working our way down to what we have to do. And then somewhere in there, and Senator Hardy, maybe when you wake up, because we did all the other bills and there are other proposals that have come to us. We had a couple today from the affordable housing people that could get pretty broad. And if we want to do that, especially in the area of telemedicine, that could be a really helpful model. And then and if you're there, there's also somebody that can assist you at getting on and unmuting and being seen. So we've got that. We've had a couple more suggestions. I know Irv, it's going to take me a while to sit down and read through Irv's ideas, but I think if we could get at least the two bills and then a block and then maybe a list of other things.
An inventory of is.
Yeah.
Yep, I can
then-
work on that. And I think sounds like you're too tired to go through it now. I did start to put together a very high level overview of decision points, very high level. And I sent it to Faith. I don't know if she's posted it, but I think I could even pull it up now just to like show you what it is. And that might be something as you're individually thinking about where you want to focus and what needs to be fleshed out that could be helpful. And
I think we've got time Thursday afternoon and we have all day Friday, which I've been reserving for this. So I think Friday, you can put this up and we will look at it. I mean, you can put it up now and just give us the 10,000 foot walkthrough, and then we can spend the whole day on Friday delving in. Senator Brock.
One of the things that I've done is I've just asked some questions of the department and a couple of other sources, because I want to also try to just put in perspective what we're talking about. We're concentrating on CUDs and we're concentrating on unserved addresses. But how much is that part of the overall landscape that we're dealing with as far as the future? And so I've asked just several questions. Are there any statistics on how many locations currently have internet access available by source? In other words, by name and by type of provider. What's the total universe we're talking about? Second, are there any statistics that would show that of those locations where access is available, and how many of such locations have the occupants actually subscribed or connected? And here I'm trying to determine the number of locations listed as served, the number of homes that have actually collected to versus those that have not, because that will show you the number of unserved locations that really aren't counted in this total that we've been talking about. Thirdly, are there statistics as to how many additional unserved locations would be served if we made broadband available universally? And then lastly, of the latter, how many of such locations are in areas not currently served by a CUD?
Other question.
In other words, we're talking, I'm not sure if we're talking, when we're concentrating on the CUDs, are we talking about 80% of the internet? Are we talking about 20% of the internet? And I'm not really sure. And that I think should also drive perhaps some of how we look at the approach. I also think, and I'll try to play with this a little bit more, is backing up, because we have this tendency to jump in with our boots on into the swamp and go attack each and every alligator in it. When, in a way, that notion of backing up to the 50,000 foot level and look at what the swamp looks like and how do you deal with alligator control overall, which means things like strategy and planning and the 10-year plan, which I know is not dealt with at all in 360. It's left the department. And that whole issue of planning, of all the stuff that we're talking about here, it's the plan and the strategy that to me is the most important driver of what we do. And so our approach in handling it seems to be that we've got to take that into account. I'm just concerned that we're fixing the problem by tightening a lot of screws here and there, but we're not looking at the overall problem.
Yeah, and I think the thing that struck me the other day when Consolidated was in is the city of Montpelier and probably most of the other built up areas are running on 25.3 if they're lucky. We had that map. I remember all the red lines, those were the cable lines, and some of the CUDs are using those, but those cable lines aren't, so it's not, you know, we are served by federal standards at 25.3, but if we're going to do 100 for everybody, we have those large flat areas that are not outside of EC Fiber and maybe Burlington Telecom. They are not getting 100. So that's another just thing we need to keep in the back of our minds. Senator Pearson.
Can I just add one thing before I finish up of what we're talking about? The other thing that we have a big divide on is that issue of, and I was going to ask Irv this if we had time today, and that is, what do you tell the person who has no internet access and won't get it for 4 to 5 years or perhaps longer to get to that 100 standard that we're insisting on? What do you tell that person who has nothing now and who's taking her child to the parking lot of the school at night in the wintertime in order to connect?
I think what Irv told us today is that we hope crisis period seems to be going to be behind us if we're going to have everybody vaccinated. That's assuming that we don't have another pandemic for 100 years. But if things go as plans say they're going to go, some of that urgency hopefully will be gone by the next school year. But the potential is there. And with the world as open as it is, the potential is much more there than it used to be when you had to sail in a ship and it took a week to get here. And then we knew if we had to isolate you when you showed up. So I had Senator
Pearson
McDonald and then Senator Pearson. I think I did see Senator McDonald first.
Madam Chair, could Maria or someone double check on one of the most recent PUC orders of the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, having to do with Green Mountain Power's role in having fiber strung along its poles. And I think there was something recent, and it would play into our decision making. That was my request.
Sure, I'd be happy to
Yep.
look into that.
And secondly, I know those of you that are not in the Times Argus area there, the witness who we don't mention by name had a long editorial, and
Senator Brock sent it to all of us.
Well, thank you, Senator Brock, because Senator Brock and I spoke about it over the weekend. It's
actually seen it before that it was sent to me.
Yeah, it looked forward instead of backwards, which is where we need to be. We look backwards for lessons, not for correcting hurt feelings, and we look forward to what will work in our strategy. So, thank you.
Okay, Senator Pearson.
I hope we can focus on some of the big goals. We have, since I've been on this committee, which seems like a lifetime, but this is my 3rd year, we have wrestled with this 25-3 versus 100. And what do you say to the poor joker that is still on DSL and is 200 yards from the cable line, and we're saying, no, we'll only pay for your perfection. I think, Madam Chair, you're right that if we're moving out of the pandemic, and let us hope, then it is a different question. And what the structure so far has been, and I think it's the right one, is not how do we get everybody broadband, although that's a question and we should be moving in that direction, but how do we take care of the unserved and the underserved? And so we haven't, I've never heard us talk about how do we upgrade the 25.3 people? That doesn't interest me right now. We've got a lot of money, but we don't have, unlimited get everybody fiber money. So to me, then things flow from there. Then things flow from there. Like, we don't actually have to decide, should we be buying cable or buying fiber? We can just go to fiber because we're basically going to go where people haven't been willing to build. And in those cases, you might as well make the marginal investment to make it future-proof. So I think I've found it, one of the things that's come up today, Irv brought it up, I've heard other people bring it up, as the way that we wrestle with this independent telecoms. How do we help the Franklin telephones? And Irv said it well. As long as they're willing to commit to serving every address in the territory. And I do think we need to figure out how to define territory. But that immediately, then if Consolidated wants to be that, I'd even be open to that. But they don't want to do that. They've made that very plain that they've had decades to do that. They won't do it. Comcast won't do it. So if that, and that hits at our need to deal with the parallel to rural electrification. Rural electrification wasn't for most people. It was for everyone. And that's to me the posture. And once you hit that, once you accept that we're starting with unserved and underserved, then you've answered some of the very basics. And I think we can quickly move beyond that and try to get into the more controversial nuts and bolts stuff. But I also want to say, in terms of engineering standards and things like that, I hope that won't be in the bill. I hope that will be baked into some of the expertise that we're trying to set up as resources, because we typically don't do a great job when we're as lay people trying to craft that. But anyway, I'm not that worried about how do you deal with the Montpeliers that I've only got.
I'm not worried about that because Consolidated is stringing line through my backyard as we speak. They're going to take care of that. I think where I've heard something different is there's probably a couple roads down Route 12 that could use, or somewhere else in a for-profit providers area, that they are not going to do it on their own dime because they're for profit, but they'll do it on our dime. And pretty much that's what we've been doing with the connectivity. And there was a Fairpoint, requirement before the PUC that they string so many lines in lieu of fines, I think it was. I can see that somewhere in this state, there are those last 9 miles. If Franklin Telephone was they are hopefully a for-profit, that last 9 miles, if we gave them some money, they'd run it. Because she's got 9 hard miles and 2 customers who may or may not sign up. That, I think, is where the hard never, over my dead body comes in. I can see where there are places, and one of the CUDs was working with one of the for-profits down south of me, and I'm not remembering which one, but I think
you're right, Madam Chair. It's a Franklin Telephone Company. If we're going to provide money for them to hook up to the end of their territory, we do not wish to, and Franklin wants to hook up to a consolidated fiber hookup. We don't want to have the consolidated people who were unwilling to go up that road and unwilling to spend their own money to earn a profit on that Franklin connection. They should have an open access where you can go in and use their fiber and allow the Franklin folks who invested in it to make the money on it. And that's maybe tricky and be
No,
someone
I
smarter
mean,
than me to figure that out.
now you
but
got
that
two
would be the way to
telephone,
do it.
telephone.
Yep.
Landline telephones are a regulated utility. They have districts and they have requirements within their districts. So I don't think you're going to see Consolidated running through Franklin.
Nope.
But there are places where you've got PUCs, and the best way to get up that other 9 miles is to pay the guy that's at the bottom of the hill to run it up the hill rather than, and I think that we leave to the PUCs. I mean,
that's what we have to-
we just cannot imagine all
That's
the
what we have to
jerry
work
rigging
out,
that is
or-
going to happen before this is over.
That's what we have to work out. But I only mentioned that not to solve that problem, but to say that that's the type of solution we have to deal with. And I didn't think you wanted this afternoon to have, go into how
I
to solve.
think
So
we need
yeah,
to
so
make
I'm
sure
done.
that we get some interconnectivity, and that'll probably be part of a rules process.
And
We
that
have
we
to
might
make
be
sure
with
that
the-
we get it to everybody, and we're gonna have to figure out a way in getting it to everybody that we also make it possible for them to afford to sign up. And that one's gonna be hard, or we're gonna say, well, we're gonna run it by your house and we'll deal with that later. There's a couple proposals out there, but maybe that's one where we might want to endow a fund, capitalize a fund with some of the ARPA money, if that's permissible. And draw down that, or the interest on that, to have an ongoing source for subsidies. I have no idea, but we've got an awful lot of cash, and the push to spend that lot of cash in 3 years could lead to some poorer decisions. So we're going to work our way through this. Okay, Senator Bray.
So I think part of what that the stuff I wrote up, that first section that's pretty engineering oriented, was in part to end up with a durable solution for the long haul that was reliable, but also to steer clear of the sort of choosing who gets money and who doesn't get money. It's like leaving the personalities out of it. If you're willing to meet the standard, then you become eligible, and whoever you are. And and so the one thing that I heard today that I thought was a pretty great idea, that's not an engineering standard, but it's that commitment to serve every customer as another test. And then I think a third test we've talked about was open access. So we don't build a public highway that only one company can drive on. And although those things, so I agree with Senator Pearson, not to write details into the statute, but we could write the high level description about interoperability and upgradability and interconnectability and all those kinds of things, serving every customer. And then the rule making could get there. We'd put the guardrails on it. Anyway, so.
Yeah, and the other, Irv was talking about open access. The one thing he was very clear on is that if we required CUDs to offer $25 a month service, that you're in the bond market, and you've got to show that you've got the profit to pay the bond. It's got to be dedicated, and to do that, especially in higher low income areas, places with more people with lower incomes, they can't do that, which is one thing to be said for the for-profits, because they can do that because they make a higher profit. And they have been doing that. So
They also cherry pick where they go, and
yes, they do.
and
They do.
can't.
I mean, that's, but when you are, offering a public service, and it gets harder to do those extras, at least in the beginning. If you can grow enough and get enough customer base and make enough profit, then you can do it. But that takes time. Okay. Anything else? Maria, thank you for putting that together. I think we'll do better when we're more awake.
No problem. That's fine. It
Uh,
is, I think it will be posted. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is it's definitely a work in progress. And if you look at it, and there are particular areas
Required, there's a clear opportunity.
Brandon McDonald, you need to mute.
you want to add or other things, you can
Mute him.
just let me know and I'll revise it. So,
Okay. Oh, I think I want to be host. I can mute people. I admitted Maria. Okay. Yeah, I think it works really well when we can have a full day. I think we'll have Renewable Energy Vermont in on Thursday if they can come to talk about the battery storage, and then we'll work our way through that bill, and if no one objects, we'll stick on our little tax section, and that's one I think we can. Sounds like everybody agrees on what we should do with that last piece, so that's one I think we can get out and get moving. The revenue bill might be a little more difficult, and right now miscellaneous tax is a piece of cake, but it might not be before we finish. Okay, Senator Hardy.
Yeah, speaking of miscellaneous tax, I sent you an email heads up this morning about some potential amendments I have, which I'll send you when I have them drafted.
Okay, I haven't.
Yeah, that's okay.
I got through my emails last night and there were 200 more this morning.
I know, it's crazy. They never stop. But I also wanted to ask you, because this came up in health and welfare this morning, what you're hearing in terms of the timing on things. Do you know?
There is a planning meeting for the end of the session at noon tomorrow, but everything I've heard is that we are going home. I believe the 15th of May is our last budgeted day. Somewhere in that second week of May. The goal is to get the budget out next Tuesday, but then the budget usually goes through a week or more of negotiations, not just with the House and the Senate, but sometimes efforts to keep it from being vetoed. And then other committees are throwing other things in to be added on. So that usually, there's a set number, but I think it's usually about 2 weeks after it comes out. The budget is the last bill to go. It is usually preceded by the miscellaneous tax bill, because depending, less now than used to be, but I can remember being told, we need $250,000, raise it. So those are usually the last two bills to go out the door.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to know, because the budget, it surprised me this morning when I heard that they were trying to get the budget out by next Tuesday.
Well, they've been trying to get 315 out since February 1st.
Fair point.
If not January 6th. So things, getting them out doesn't mean it's the end. we didn't do it last year, and I don't think we did it the year before, but normally they will suspend morning committees a week to 2 weeks before the end so that this committee and approps can work all day. All these bills we're voting out of health and welfare will end up in approps, if not here. We usually get a lot of energy and economic development bills at the end. And there's been less of a volume this year than other years, but it's still going to take us some time to get broadband put together and then negotiated with the House. So we need to have time to do that. Senator Pearson.
Well, is it your understanding that when approps tries to vote the budget in a week, that it would include ARPA money? I mean, I'm surprised, for instance, in my morning committee, we haven't been asked to suggest ideas. What about as economic development or healthcare? Have you?
There is some ARPA money in the budget as it came from the House. Joint Fiscal Committee is meeting tomorrow morning because ARPA is a grant. And Joint Fiscal has to agree to accept the grant.
Right.
And last year, what we did is we accepted the grant with these conditions. A certain bucket was just emergency funds, the administration could use them. Then there was another bucket they could use with joint fiscal approval, but the bulk of the money went through the appropriations process. This year, I think we're still trying, this planning meeting is putting off the money chairs meeting, and things are just moving quickly. We're still trying to figure out, ARPA is not coming to the state as one huge pile of money. It's more designated. And so we're trying to figure out exactly what's there and how it's going to be managed. So it is a work in progress, and hopefully we'll know more by the end of the week. But we're looking at a world in which on March 31st, the feds changed the tax code for the previous year, and that's like 15 days before your taxes are supposed to be filed. This is not the normal world. So
I'm looking forward to the meeting tomorrow, Chris. We have not been asked specifically for suggestions to give the Senate Appropriations Committee, but we're very much working on recommendations to give the Senate Appropriations Committee with the ARPA money.
yeah, I think health and welfare is looking, especially at the child care bill, because that is a bill in play that has some serious implications for ongoing funding and some serious money attached to it.
But for instance, a year ago, Senate Ag dreamed up $50 million sort of, and then we were told, well, you can play with 30. And so we put a bunch of time though. I'm hearing folks say maybe we'll have 3 or 4 days. That's frustrating, but I did just get an email from Representative Till. They voted out the S-53.
Yep.
It has a new exemption. It has the exemption for menstrual products, but also major restructuring of Vermont's corporate tax structure, the cloud tax, exemption of income tax for first 10 grand of military retirement, and change in mutual fund DFR registration fees. So we've gone back to that one. So we may, if I had a guess, we might want to consider just tacking on the menstrual exemption.
I think that one, I did tell you that Representative Ansel did tell me that that's what she thought. She didn't tell me about the 10,000 in the, so we're going to tax the state employees' pension, but not the generals. I think we might get some pushback there, but that's out of committee, but it's not off the floor, is it? Yeah. So we'll have to, I, at this point, can't see us doing the cloud tax. They always send that to us, usually on miscellaneous, yeah, like the last 2 weeks of the session. I don't see us passing that one out. I think if we want to take anything off it, it'll go on miscellaneous tax. And then they have spent all year on this corporate tax, and I think a good part of last year. This is their, major work for the year. And we'll look at that, and we'll look at the cloud tax. But I can't see how we're going to get anything out. And I don't think when you send something over 3 weeks before a committee, a major bill, that you can expect that we're going to do it, but we'll see.
Are we ready to end the?
I think we're ready to end live stream. I think everybody's ready to end everything.
Okay.
We'll be back tomorrow. We'll see everyone.